Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is David Shavrin. I'm the president and CEO of the News Media Alliance, and this is our first episode of something we call News Take. Here at the Alliance, we're focused on helping news publishers create strategies and business models that are going to help them thrive for years to come. We're always exploring new event formats and topics to bring to our members and other people in the industry. And what we've heard is there's a need for some really deep perspective and insights around the whole range of innovation taking place in the industry. And there's a lot of it. And basically how different organizations are applying different theories and ideas to their businesses. So we decided to have some conversations about it and share those conversations with you. We're calling this series of discussions News Take. A News Take conversation isn't meant to be superficial, particularly. We're aiming to be a little bit more in the weeds. We want to talk to people who are doing the real work and thinking around the business of news. And we frankly want to be a little wonky, ask some thorny questions, share details so that you walk away saying, maybe we got to try that, or that's not something I'd thought of before. So for our inaugural News Take conversation, I wanted to speak to two leaders who bring a wealth of experience in providing some of the best local news experiences to the U.S. and growing loyal audiences. We're very happy to have with us Mike Oren, who's the Chief Product Officer of the Dallas Morning News. He leads the teams responsible for all digital products, marketing, business intelligence, and digital audience. And prior to that, he was the president at Belo Business Intelligence, where he led marketing, analytics, product development, strategy, and sales for A.H. Belo, the publisher of the Dallas Morning News. Jim Bernard is also with us, is Senior Vice President for Digital at the Star Tribune in Minneapolis. He has responsibility for the company's portfolio of digital properties and operations. He also oversees dozens of other digital products, including the Trib's mobile apps, print replica edition, citypages.com, and several Minnesota high school sports websites. Jim joined the Star Tribune in 2010 from Dow Jones MarketWatch. And prior to MarketWatch, he had a series of executive positions at Dow Jones. We're extremely lucky to have these two very thoughtful, big brains in the industry with us for this initial take on News Take. So with that, listen, I'm going to give you both a lot of chance to speak. And while I think you two are often on the same page, I think you're not always on the same page, which is even more fun. So let's start with a broad question. You know, one of the things, whenever we go to, if you go to any event, any conference related to news, local news in particular, there's this mantra of know your audience, get to know your audience. And usually the discussion doesn't get much further than that, which is knowing your audience, I think is a good thing, but the application of that can be hard. And so, you know, I'll start with you, Mike, but if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, how do you think about both your typical reader and subscriber, maybe as those being different things, and how do you really do the mechanics of working to understand them, what they want, and what they want delivered to them?
Yeah, and I think actually I would first I think we've got to, before we delve deep into that question, you have to even split that. One of the things that we've really been finally facing up to, I think in the last year or so, is that print subscriber and that digital subscriber are very different people. And the gulf between them, I think, is bigger than we've all probably pretended in recent years. So, you know, for us, it's a combination of you know, quant and qual, and the quant is increasingly you know, around digitally the behaviors we can see, how people respond to content. Does it make them subscribe? Does it make them go deeper? You know, in the last couple of years, we've started to get that kind of data on our e-paper. And I don't think of our e-paper as a digital product. I think of our e-paper as another one of our print products that people may consume on an iPad. And look, and then we at least in the last quarter or so, as we've been doing a lot of longer term planning, have done some qual research with those readers. And look, it's very clear at a generalized level our digital readers want local breaking, trending as fast as they can get it and in an easy to consume format. Yeah. And our print readers still want a complete package that includes national, international. They still, many of them look at that as their only news source for the day. And they want a depth and a familiarity that isn't necessarily there for the digital readers. You know, the print readers, you add a page of comics or puzzles to their e-edition and they lose their mind. They're overjoyed. You can't get your digital readers to use a puzzles product because they use the New York Times or what have you. So I think we have to, we now keep almost an entirely separate pulse on the two. And I think the big question is, you know, how do you attract more of the true digital? And then how are we retaining those print / e-paper folks? And how do you bridge the gaps between the things that are unique between the two?
That's fascinating, by the way. And then you have to get into how do you produce the content that satisfies them. But one of the things, I was trying to talk to somebody the other day about the print product. And I was saying one of the beauties of it for some people is that it ends, meaning you can read the paper as a past tense verb, which is an act that also is almost like good health. Like I ate a good breakfast, I jogged, and I read the paper, right? And not really interested in the fire hose of dissatisfaction, meaning 10 minutes after you read it, you're feeling behind, right? And whereas, you know, there's going to be that audience that really does want just to be the updated thing that changes every hour. And probably if it doesn't change every hour, that's annoying to them. Do you see elements of that in those two readerships?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny as you said that. I flashed back to a couple of years ago. We did a focus group on some print changes that we were making and how to message it. And one of our longest standing subscribers, a wonderful woman, found out I was in charge of digital and pulled me aside. And she said, I'm trying to use your website. I'm trying to get with it and use your website, but please stop with all the breaking news. And she literally said, if the president is impeached at 3 p.m, I don't want to know about it till 6 a.m.
Yeah, that's annoying, right? It gets in the way of dinner. Yeah, it's fascinating. Jim, so how do you, do you have similar experiences? I mean, how do you think about this? And how are you guys looking at this landscape of readers, subscribers, and how they consume?
Well, first I wanted to ask Mike. Mike's already said 2 provocative things that I'm excited to follow up with him on. The first one, Mike, is how do you think about the reader audience that is hybrid? The people who get, like you said, you kind of put it into 2 distinct. First off, I think Mike and I would probably really object to the question's premise that there's a typical reader. Like there isn't really a typical reader. There are segments, and through analytics and research and, you know, all the experiences we have with our customers, we're able to understand those segments. When I think about the print segment, Mike, I think about that segment having a group of people who are never going to come online, that just not willing to, like that wonderful story of the person who doesn't want to know till the next day, which I love her.
By the way, that's probably much healthier, just FYI.
Yeah, no, yeah, but then there's a set of people who are going to get that print product. They're going to use the print product and then they're going to use the digital product all day. There's a set of those people too. Do you see those people in your analytics, and do you have a sense about whether they're more or less valuable to the enterprise?
Well, everyone is valuable. Every customer. And I say that not in jest, but I mean, look, we're in a business now where subscription is the lifeblood, right? We've gone from the ad-driven world to the subscription-driven world. So we care about every segment. I mean, but your question is fair, because I mean, the print readers it's much more revenue, obviously, than the digital readers, and the hybrid readers go into that. But our data shows that that true hybrid, the one who reads the print paper and then gets on the website, is a very, very, very small segment. So we tend to generalize, I think, partly because that segment's pretty small, and what they are is they're news junkies who we love, who they're going to consume everything we do. But I'm much more, I lose sleep more thinking about how do we keep those print people for as long as possible, and how do we get the new pure digitals. I think it's probably people like us who grew up on print but are still digital first that make up that wonderful small sliver of the true hybrid audience. But I just don't think it's that big.
How big, do you know how big it is for you? For you guys? I'm looking it up for us right now.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'd say it's under 10%.
Okay, so for us, we're just going to do this like if you said...
Show off.
Sorry, but it's a big audience for us. I mean, it's a really big audience for us, I think. I mean, I don't know. You can decide. In September, the print audience that is, I guess it's not as big as I had hoped. The print audience that has a subscription and logged into the website is a third of the print audience, 30%.
Well, okay, and I would say, look, if you go with just logged in once, yeah, we're probably in about the same range.
But logged in once over the course of a month shows that they're digitally active. I mean, because you don't have to log in.
Yeah.
I guess this is where I'm thinking about the other thing you said that I'm sure it's an issue of semantics, but I disagreed with was I think of the e-edition, or as they say in Dallas, the e-paper. I think of that as being a digital product. In fact, I think of it as the gateway product for the digital transition. We have to get those people who are the print readers to use the digital e-paper, e-edition. Because when there comes a time when I have to change their service because they live somewhere weird, we can't deliver to them anymore or whatever. And so we've been having kind of a big debate about whether or not how we should be incentivizing consumers to use the e-edition, because we have some print consumers who pay for it, and we have other print consumers who aren't using it. That I'm an advocate for giving it to them, saying, look, if you pay for print, you should use the e-edition, because sooner or later I'm going to take your print away.
Yeah, Jim,
right.
Can I interrupt you? Because this gets to a really interesting question, sort of how I took Mike's initial commentary was you had a print subscriber. And by the way, I've talked to Mike Klainsmith about this in the past, a print subscriber who really wants the buffet. Okay. They want the salad, they want this, they want the local, international, the comics at the back, they want that whole buffet. Whereas there is maybe a digital oriented reader who, may get their national from the New York Times or Washington Post and really wants to know what's going on with the stars or something intensely local. And so it was almost a content mix. And how do you, and I was thinking maybe the e-edition is more of a content mix like the print paper, right? It's got news from the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you think about that, Jim?
I think that we have to meet readers with a product that suits them across all channels, including print. So I start with, like, we at the Strib have invested heavily in print. We still have a very large newsroom. We still have a high quality print product. We're still investing in that. That's important. We have a huge audience that gets it. They pay a lot of money for it. We have a big investment in it. It's not going anywhere. And those customers are customers, and we love them, and they love the print product. We also have some of those, we have an e-edition and an app and a mobile website and a high school website. Like, we have all different ways. We have alerts and emails, and And I have to have a portfolio of ways that people can consume it. We have consumers like our audience research suggests that we have some consumers who we are appointment for them. You can kind of see them in the analytics. You can almost hear their oatmeal being consumed. It's like the same day.
It sounds unpleasant. I have to tell you.
It's fine. If they're buying the product, I'm delighted. But you can see that they arrive at the same time every day. They, do the same number of page views. And then we have other people that are fitting us in during the day. They're doing 2 mobile page views while they're waiting in line, right? And so we serve all of those different things. The question I think that is important for us to think about is, how are we investing in maintaining and growing those products to meet those consumer needs or to go beyond those consumer needs? And one of the things that's interesting based on this entire podcast, we've started the podcast and we're talking about print and e-edition.
Right.
I mean, we've just spent 10 minutes talking about print and e-edition. I could spend an hour talking about print and e-edition, but I would propose that people in our industry are a lot more comfortable talking about print and e-edition. David, your question frames, and then you're like, oh, and print has all of these values. It's like, yes, it has all those values. But what I wake up every day and worry about is, how am I converting new digital subscribers? Like, that is where all of the energy that I want to spend on this. Not that I want to disregard the e-edition, it's super important, but a very good e-edition, a nicely delivered thing with a vendor can satisfy a lot of people, whereas trying to get people to write the right kind of content for mobile consumption at the right velocity is a much harder thing to do. And that's part of what our industry is still in a conversion. I'll say one other thing and then I'll pass, but no one tells you if the paper you delivered to their doorstep got picked up. Mm-hmm. Like Mike and I can go and have research studies all we want and ask people questions, and we know it is getting picked up. But every single digital session, I can tell you exactly what they read, how long they spent on it, what they did next. And so in some ways, the print products usage is anecdotal. The digital products usage is precise. Yeah. And, to that extent, when we start to say, well, what are segmentations inside of that? What should we do more of? How do we convert? Like, all of that universe is at a whole different level of kind of knowledge that you come to that conversation with the consumer on. And that's a place where I feel like we're really growing. We're not there yet, which is understanding those consumers well enough to make sure that we're giving them what they seek from us.
Yeah, and by the way, by the way, Jim, I wasn't, it wasn't some nostalgic extolling the virtues of print. Really what I was trying to get at is these, there are these different, we're talking about audience, right? Know your audience. But their audience expectations sometimes go like this, right? And so then it gets to the question you noted, which I'm going to ask Mike about, which is, then in terms of the producing the content and the mix, how do you make sure you're producing the right content, the right places? Because you're right. Historically, we just repurposed the print stuff for this digital audience. And by the way, that's a bad idea. Okay. So then how do you think about the whole content creation and optimization for these different audiences? Mike?
Yeah, and real quick before I dive into that, I think I do want to pull out a little nuance, I think, in how Jim and I are maybe thinking about this. Where I was going on the e-paper is more of, it used to be my most despised product. I mean, it has...
By you or by the readers or by who?
By me. Okay. It has all of the liabilities of both mediums and none of the benefits of either. However, when I started, and I've been doing, local digital media my whole career, but when I started here at the Morning News, rebuilding our digital stuff back in 2018, I had this starry-eyed vision of everybody in our community onto our website and using our .com products, right? And what I've realized from both studying the data and the anecdotes is look, I have despaired of any notion of getting a 70-year-old print reader to start using our website if they aren't already. That's part one of that. Part two of it is print continues to be very important. It's not going away soon, but look, I'm going to draw a provocative line in the sand. Ultimately, local print is going away. And we've seen some of our peers out there, you look at the Tampas, you look at the Little Rocks, who have already largely gone down this road, and you can see what's happening with them. And I think the most encouraging thing I've seen in that, without going into their numbers, is how much of that print audience they've been able to retain by continuing to do the e-paper product. And seeing that was a wake-up call for me about a year ago that made me say, okay, this is not a product that we're going to sunset anytime soon. In fact, it will very likely outlive print. And we need to start seeing how we can get the diehard print readers accustomed to it. And that's why we've been doing things like, bonus coverage of certain things, and anything that we do cut out of print, we keep in the e-paper. And I think that's the important piece of that. So you did ask a question that I didn't answer, which was about content and how we.
Hang on. I want to.
All right, good. All right. This is going to wind up being like This is going to wind up being like the Beatles Get Back series.
Yes.
On hour 7 of Jim and I talking about e-papers.
Oh my gosh, it's awful.
Maxwell Silver Hammer, just for a couple hours.
So, first, I 100% agree and have to totally plus one your experience with the e-paper, which is my experience as well, which was I came at this with a certain amount of digital arrogance. You didn't say that, but and
I'll talk to it.
Yeah, in fact, I've been at this a lot longer. I'm not going to say because it makes me sound super old, but one of my first things I did when I got to the Strib was I released an iPad app. And I said, oh, well, what we'll do is we'll just move all the e-edition people over to the iPad app. Yeah. And we literally did that. And then they came and threatened to burn my house to the ground. We have a joke that if we don't send the e-edition email out to people that says that the edition is available, that, the call center is razed to the ground. These people love this product, and it's a very good product. And I have a healthy and a respect for it, but a begrudging respect from a digital perspective, because you think it's a PDF of a newspaper, but it's actually a very good product, and it's helping those people a lot. The second thing, Mike, I really am done talking about e-edition, but I would love to hear how your incremental additions to the e-edition have been working, because we've been thinking about that, and people are always like, well, Dallas is doing it. I mean, do you see extra engagement and retention, and or is it just the kind of thing where people are like, thanks for not getting rid of that thing?
Yeah, it varies. So it hurts the journalist in my heart. The incremental page of puzzles and comics drove tremendous adoption. The extra Olympics wire coverage that we did, didn't really do much. I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with somebody at, I won't name the chain in case they didn't want to say this, but one of the chains who puts like 50 pages of extra stuff at the back of their e-paper every day. Right. It's sort of all the stuff that you used to get in the newspaper in the 80s when, a Tuesday would be 120 pages. And they claim they're getting tremendous engagement on it. And so we're thinking about some of that. I think the thing that we've not sorted yet, Jim, and that I think is going to be interesting to learn is we're learning a lot about print via the new data we have on the e-paper. If you can make the logical leap that the e-paper reader is not dramatically different from the print reader, you start learning that you have features in your package that you thought were critical that nobody's engaging with.
That's interesting.
Like we have the continual debate over the stock tables.
Yeah.
Right. We want to take out the stock tables. Well, we tried that and everybody screamed and cried. So you can't touch the stock tables. Well, our e-paper tells us at least the e-paper readers of the print type product do not engage with our stock tables at all. So we might go revisit our thinking about that in print. So we have been starting to use the digital in print product development more.
Hey, so let's ask about the pure digital reader, right? So there's going to be a whole thesis that you should only be doing local news, right? What's going on with the mayor, what's going on with sports teams, what's going on with COVID locally, and that reader is going to consume national, international, political someplace else, right? That you do what you're good at, they do what they're good at. But that's sort of always struck me as a sort of esoteric argument. Like, yeah, in theory, that may be a good theory, but is that really what your pure digital readers want? Do they just want to get your local stuff and they're going someplace else, or do they want some of that buffet idea still?
I think there's a key question when you ask what they want. Are there things they would like to read and that they will consume, versus are there things that they will pay you for? Right?
Yeah.
I'll go away from national, international for a second to make the point. Readers always tell us they want arts and entertainment content, and they will read it and engage with it. And subscribers will consume it at a very high volume, but they never buy subscriptions off of it. Broadly speaking, it does not move the needle. I think national and international to an extent can be that way. Now we try and localize them all, right? It always makes me think of my favorite newspaper movie is The Paper, the Michael Keaton movie, and where like they're sitting there in that New York newsroom going through all the news of the world, and it was like, an earthquake happened here, but no one from New York, right? And then this time, and then finally they get to like a train derailment with like two guys from the Bronx. Like, so I think we think about national and international that way, where you can localize it. Yeah, I think, and we probably haven't done enough testing on it. I think readers might want it more than we give it to them, but they sure as hell aren't going to pay the Dallas Morning News for the latest on what's happening in Europe.
Yeah, it's a Jim. What's your kind of take on that?
Readers want, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, readers want short, frequent, mobile-friendly articles about the Dallas Cowboys.
They want that in Minneapolis? That's pretty impressive. Yeah. They must be America's team.
Yeah, well, no, we get a lot of Minneapolis readers. I'm glad you said that, Jim. So we have a new editor here, Catrice Hardy, just joined us here a few months ago. And look, her big focus is breaking and trending. And to your point, we've already started making a transition where we used to write one really long article about a thing. Now we do 4 short ones, and you got the breaking news, and then you've got the update, you've got the what it means, you've got the explainer on. So yeah, we're very much following that model. Breaking, trending, fast, short. Cowboys, yes, is big for us nationally, but even bigger, real estate, dining, restaurants opening and closing, and high school sports, right? So I mean, again, gets back to the truly local nature. So yeah, I think you have to look at it in 2 vectors of like, what is the type and format, and then what are the verticals that people care about? And I don't know if you find the same ones, but I mean, for us, number 1 is real estate and number 2 is dining.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we know is that the more broadly read somebody is, the more that they're likely to subscribe. And the more that they come, they're more likely to subscribe. So one challenge when we talk about what readers want is that Mike and I are working with newsrooms where we're always trying to give them ideas about a single thing that they're going to do. But the reality is that we still are a bundle product, and we have to have a robust bundle for the people who are going to find enough value in it to continue to pay it. And so, my joke about sports is that I know that I could find audience for more local information about sports. But if I'm going to convert those people, I need to have a good opinion section. I need to have a great business section. I need to have restaurant reviews. And it's not until people are tipping over to 3 to 5 visits and a bunch of times hitting the meter before they finally get there. And they can't get there if you don't have a lot of high quality content. So what's interesting about the premise is, if you were trying to scope it all the way out, you would say, what we need is information about things that Minnesotans care about, lots of it, as much as we can possibly produce with the team we have. And as long as somebody cares about it, I'm going to get some interaction that's going to move them closer to a decision. And so that's kind of an equivocation. It's not as satisfying as saying restaurants reviews are killing it. You know, if you talk to the folks at Newsday, they have a theory, or they have a calculation, and they can tell you precisely what the incremental lift of a given thing is. I admire that, but at some level, I'm not sure that I'm going to change the coverage as much as to say to my news team, hey, you need to write stuff that looks good on mobile, and you need to write stuff that people care about, and you need to write more stuff.
Yeah. So
go on, David, real quick before we go on, because I want to yes and Jim in a big way on this, and I've got a concrete example that will echo you. So we had up until this year, we had a subscription you could buy to the entire digital suite, and then we had a much cheaper subscription that you could buy to sports only, and then we had an even cheaper subscription you could buy to high school sports only. And mainly to simplify the business, we discontinued both the sports only subs, and went back to, if you're going to subscribe, you're going to buy the whole buffet. We have sold more than triple the number of high school sports driven subs to the entire product this year than we sold to the sports only that was cheaper, thinking that there were people who only wanted sports. So the thesis there goes back to Jim's point of, you got to have the overall buffet, and it is easier for me to get a Dallas sports enthusiast interested in our whole suite of products than by getting them to pull out their wallet just to pay for sports. And I think that does make a lot of this analytic piece a little bit harder, because you have to then figure out, well, what is the right melange of stuff? Like, we've gotten very focused on it, and we're still not doing enough on it. But we saw that when people started consuming from an additional section, they were very likely to quickly subscribe. So I've been reading all sports, and then I trip into an art story and start reading there, right? So to Jim's point, you want the newsroom creating a lot of content across a lot of areas. And then from like a product perspective, you got to figure out how you serendipitously encourage that lane skipping.
Yeah. So we're going to shift gears here a little bit. I want to talk about other formats, audio and video, and how you think about them. Again, as a point of theory, let's say, you guys create lots of local news content that was always the seed corn for TV news, radio news, everything, right? You always created this stuff that was then delivered in these other formats. A. B, unlike the past, you don't need a federal license to get into the video or audio business anymore, right? It's the audiences are migrating, probably slower than people expect, but migrating to digital spaces with audio and video products. And you can get into that with a camera and a good microphone. May not be great at it, by the way, which is another topic, but the barriers to entry are relatively low. And there are other monetization opportunities in those spaces, right? Video ads still do pretty well. Audio is sort of figuring out the ad unit question. But, at the end of the day, again, you have the raw material, and we've talked about e-edition and print and digital. How do you think about these other spaces as places where you can deliver that content? Obviously, you have the New York Times that's done pretty well with their podcast products. there's not, by the way, everybody always says that. And then the long list of other people who've done well with their news podcast products is pretty short. But, you know, how are you guys wrestling with these questions about taking your content and delivering it someplace else?
First, David, I'm so glad that you brought up the New York Times. Mike and I are delighted to hear our products compared to the New York Times, because that's something that we can easily say, well, we're not the New York Times, you know, like we don't have huge, you know, hundreds of people. I mean, you might as well be comparing us to Netflix. So anyway, I'm teasing, but
I'll tell you a joke about it. I used to deal with somebody who talked about education policy. And if you hear people talk about colleges, oftentimes Harvard gets injected into the conversation. Well, yeah. In a similar way, it's really hard to talk about news publishing without these sort of lodestone, like what's the Times doing? Everybody reacting to it. And really what I'm trying to get at here is how your perspectives are different, right?
Yeah. So here's the way that we think about it. Instead of, you know, buying cereal, which would be awesome. What we do is we have a culture of kind of experimentation and exploration that is not tied to specific business goals. So basically, I love how the newsroom takes a new thing and turns it into a storytelling tool. Whether it's a video, or we have an incredible sports podcast. You know, a couple guys on the sports team decided to do that. We have an amazing Instagram daily stories feed, and every time, you know, my kids and millennials on my team are like, "Our Instagram is amazing," right? And that just happened because we had some people who did it, and they were going to experiment. They didn't come and ask for like, "Hey, what's the P&L on Instagram?" They just went ahead and did it. And that culture of experimentation really allows us to be in all of those places in ways that are interesting, that we learn, and that help. It's important and it's useful as long as it doesn't pull focus from selling full price digital subscriptions. Because all I really care about is getting people to pay full price for digital subscriptions. Yeah. So it's totally fine if you want to do video. And I can tell you how many subscriptions come from that if you care. But for the most part, you know, there's enough room in the system for people to do experimentation and for us to be on those platforms. As I mentioned earlier, we have a huge number of platforms we already have to be in and maintain. And so there's a limited amount of newsroom resources. Our newsroom, both from a creativity standpoint and from a resourcing standpoint, I feel like gets the tone right of being there without over investing in it to a point where it's like, yeah, well, that's great, but we actually didn't have anybody sell subs this month. So that's kind of where we are in terms of all of these other things. We don't really look at them from a straight ROI standpoint. I don't think video from an ROI standpoint is ever going to pay out.
So that's really interesting. And the key point being the monetization around it, while pleasant, whatever it is compared to one digital subscriber, you know, one new subscriber. This sort of gets back to the debate we can have about micropayments. And that's the last time I'm going to mention that term on this.
No, podcast. Let's not go there.
Yeah. Where, you know, all of this effort, this hamster wheel churn over here compared to, you know, one subscriber is not a good balance. Is that kind of similar idea? In the sense
the thing is, David, I don't think it would make much sense for us to look at every single thing inside of a bundle and every different platform and every different thing that a journalist could do today and say, let's quickly attach a hardcore ROI analysis to that, because that wouldn't lead us to have the rich product we have. No one was ever going to create subscriptions using Instagram when they first started, but I'm sure Instagram is helpful in making awareness that will sell subscriptions over time. And also, it's a great storytelling tool. They're doing a great job. And so, you know, it's a big newsroom and there's room for them to do that. So from my perspective, I look at it more like we got to have a portfolio of different places that we are, and we need to have room to experiment because everything evolves. You know, what actually sells subscriptions are visits to the website for print content.
Right. Well, and that's, you know, I think that's exactly the right attitude. And I think that the only thing we have to watch and we try and be careful of is you want to encourage the experimentation and dabbling here and there and let people follow their passions. But then there comes the question of, are we investing in this as a company, right? Are we making this channel a priority this year. And I think the only way our experience really differs from Jim's is we, for instance, on audio and video, we went probably 7-8 years ago all in a big way, spent a lot of money, didn't get a lot of return. And that actually made us probably a little too gun shy on the experimentation side. But we've got a lot of smart folks in the newsroom who have started swinging back a little bit and dispelling the myth of like, oh, we never do audio. But you know, I think we're getting smarter about it and picking shots. But it's not like, you know, as we're planning out next year and we're looking at where we're going to really focus strategies, we're talking about breaking and trending. We're not talking about audio and video specifically, you know, beyond how they organically happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. And also one of the things people always underplay is quality execution. You know, let's take video, for example. You know, lighting matters, right? The sound matters, right? I think for a while there was this thesis that everybody could just set up an iPhone and create compelling video content. And, you know, it's a little more complicated than that. You know, on the audio side, the host really matters, right? Is the host a compelling person? Because that's a very ultimately kind of intimate medium, right? Is the host really matters? So, you know, how you do it also matters. That's really interesting and thoughtful. I want to, you know, last couple minutes we have here, I want to dig into some of the things on the technology side. What, in thinking about where the industry is and where it can go. By the way, one of my originating thesis that is that I still think people don't understand that you both have much bigger audiences than in history, right? You have many, many, many more people touching your content than in ever the dreamy print, golden era of print, right? It is, so you have you don't have an audience problem at the end of the day. There's demand for what you do. It's monetization, and I'll put on my advocate hat. I'm not asked. I get paid to fight for a digital marketplace that compensates the content. But at the end of the day, it is this connection between this great content and the audience and what happens in between. And you know, it's been a struggle certainly for the industry to climb up the technology ladder. Struggle for any kind of industry. What do you think the industry does better than people might expect? And where do you think the biggest holes are? Where do we really need to make investments as an industry, or where do we need the most help or the most input in terms of, you know, the technology behind taking our great stuff, our great professional, expensive content, and connecting it with audiences in ways that pays the bills?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and you got both Jim and I kind of silenced here.
Excellent. That's fantastic. That was my goal. No, like, yeah. What do you think we do? We've gotten to where we do pretty well. Like, I get that we didn't used to do stuff well, but what are you really proud of in terms of your technology and how you're thinking about connecting the content with the audiences?
Well, I'm gonna give you one that's both that we do better than people think, and that we have a long ways to go, which is creating digital subscriptions. I mean, that, you know, 10 years ago we weren't doing that at all, right? Yeah. And we found our way to a place where many people buy digital subscriptions online from us, and they transact and they give us a credit card and we send them a bill, and you know, that whole universe is incredibly complicated. Subscription systems are not as simple as they look. So things like when your subscription comes up and all of that stuff, I'm not going to use the word dunning, but like there's a whole complicated universe in there that we do pretty well at. And I think sometimes consumers who, you know, go to Amazon and click on a thing and it shows up, think of that as being really straightforward, and it's not actually straightforward. So that I think we actually do pretty well at. I think the thing that I feel like is something we're not doing very well on is account management. like just the mechanics of, how to interact and have a relationship with a brand online, in part because we have a lot of legacy systems that are complicated and difficult to use. And those legacy systems, are serving a legacy product. So they're unmovable in some ways. You can't say, well, let's just not use those things, because they actually are also doing a good job of delivering a print newspaper. And so that comes across sometimes in digital awkwardness around, why is it that I can go to Netflix or Spotify and make these kinds of choices about my relationship with you, and it's very hard to do at the Star Tribune. So that would be a place where I feel like as an industry, if we're going to become more circulation and subscription based, we need to get more aggressive about managing those relationships digitally. I'll give you one quick example. If you don't pay if your credit card goes wrong, then you go into a process that will have us sending you a print bill. So suddenly you'll be a digital consumer, you'll be getting a print bill. And if you pay that bill, we'll just keep sending you print bills. Now, you probably don't want print bills, right? And maybe you do, in which case we're happy to do it. But there's just this kind of like, well, that's just because that's what we do. And it turns out a bunch of those people will continue to pay. So you can't just stop doing it, so reconfiguring that entire process is very hard. It's a business process challenge that involves lots of different systems, and it doesn't instantly turn into a bucket of revenue that you can put on a P&L and get people excited about. So those are the kinds of boring projects that I think we still have in front of us.
To validate that, I was a little this call because our subscriptions leader was in my office and we were banging our heads against the wall about the middleware that talks between our print and hybrid subscribers and our digital subscribers, and what we were or were not going to invest in improving that this year. So there's a lot of folks who will hear this who have the same problem. I think that where we have a more visible kind of technology problem that we have to solve, it's more of a business and consumer expectation problem. And I'm going to go back to where Jim was like, thanks for comparing us to the New York Times, because we're nothing like the New York Times. However, the stats, the research out there tells you that, the average consumer is only going to buy 5 or 6 digital subscriptions. Only one of them is going to be news. It may not be as stark in Minneapolis, but I can tell you the New York Times has a lot more digital subscribers in Dallas-Fort Worth than I do. And the average consumer does not think about us that differently from them. They have the same expectations of us that they have of them. And so, for instance, we put most of our development thought and emphasis on the .com, the web product. One of our board members corralled me yesterday for 20 minutes showing me all of the deficiencies in our app versus the New York Times app, which he's not wrong. And all of the things that he likes about the New York Times app, I would love to do. And we work with a great, very competent vendor who provides us a nice off-the-shelf app that roughly, I want to say, 5% of our digital consumers engage with. Yeah. But the fact is, we are all in competition with the Washington Post and the New York Times, whether we like it or not. And we are not entirely at parity in terms of what we can do product-wise, just because of budgets and size and scale. And I think that's going to be an ongoing struggle, because I have a hard time making my next door neighbor understand why my app doesn't do this thing. And that can be as esoteric as a groovy interactive feature, or it could be as simple as them not understanding why Facebook, Twitter, Safari, and their email program all have different browsers, and they have to log in every time they access us through a different app on their phone, right? Like, these are the kinds of problems that I think comes down to the consumer-focused things that we all completely can rationalize why they're the way they are, but the person paying us has no understanding.
Yeah, because it's on their menu of choices, right? So they compare and contrast. That's really interesting. And by the way, this discussion's been fantastic. I really appreciate it. We are going to end this way, which is, it's near the end of the year. And it's the time for a great optimism. And there's a lot of reason, actually, I think, for optimism in a lot of spaces. What are you excited about for 2022? So either one of you, dive in and let me know. What are you excited about for the year ahead?
Well, I'll go for us just specifically in our organization. I really feel like our product group and our newsroom are super aligned, and the existing team, with Catrice, they're starting to do all the things that in the product team we've been going, God, if the newsroom would only do that. So I'm hopeful for us that this is the year that a plan comes together.
Excellent. Jim?
Well, I hope that's right. I hope that for you too. The thing that we are excited about next year is that we are looking at trying to differentiate the subscriber experience from the non-subscriber experience. So we have a punch list of about more ideas than we can deal with, more than we'll be able to do. But we seem to have a consensus that it's important from a retention and acquisition standpoint to create new products that are subscriber-only products. And in the past, that's often been a differentiation about like ad density or the meter, which tend to be negatives. And we're starting to look at those more as a positive. So one idea that the New York Times has executed that we admire is the subscribers share an article. And I feel like if I can get subscribers share an article out, it will help me with audience development. It'll help me with subscriber retention. It'll help me with subscription acquisition. And it's not easy, but that's the kind of idea that we're looking at for next year. And this last year was a very successful year for us, but a lot of things that we did this last year were really back-end systems, boring things that that set the table for the things that are really going to be meaningful for consumers. And some of those will look like parody to New York Times, but for our audience, if I can get a handful of people to do those shares, or we also have some ideas around audio, getting like read an article function for subscribers. Might not be all that complicated, and I think would be a nice addition. So that's, those are the things that I think when we get excited, it's about, doing something that makes consumers excited, because that's the thing that obviously we're all here to do.
That's really fantastic. And as I think you both know, I'm a real optimist about the local news industry. At the end of the day, you have to be compelled by the idea that you create something people want and need, and that it's rare and valuable. And, we will figure out the rest. It's hard, by the way, but we will figure out the rest. Listen, I really can't thank you guys enough. Mike Oren, Jim Bernard, two of the best, most fantastic thinkers in the local news business. This has been a great conversation. Very much appreciated. And I hope everybody has a really great holiday.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Thank you.